Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, good morning for some of you to all the countries of the Europe, maybe all the world. And we are very happy that you came and you have so big interest for this event because it's very special and it's I think we all are here because we want somehow to support children and parents who encounter such a traumatic stress now and such a severe situation in their homes and in their countries. So that's why we are all here, and I'm really happy for that. And Maggie Kline decided to, without any hesitation, to give us her time and knowledge and to together with us. So we are very, very happy, and we would like that this would reach as much people as it can, and then we will be very happy. So before I give the word to Maggie herself to introduce herself and Trauma Picture Book, I would like to ask Katka Honzíková if she can say a little bit about the project and how everything started.
Thank you. So hello everybody, hello colleagues, hello friends. I am really happy to see that so many people are interested in helping refugees. My name is Kateřina Honzíková and I am the director of a small humanitarian initiative from Prague, Czech People for Syria, and also the director of an Erasmus co-founded project, Trauma Proofing Syrian and Refugee Children. The trauma handbook that Maggie will take you through tonight is one of the intellectual outputs of this project. And it was based on the book by Maggie Kline and Peter Levine, Trauma Proofing Your Kids for Parents. And we tried to make it as simple as possible for refugee parents while trying to keep the essential principles from the original book. So that's one book that we made. Then there is another book. It's called the Trauma Handbook. It's also based on Trauma Proofing Your Kids. And the other book contains
I think the activities are from the big book.
They are in both books. I used both these.
Yes, you use both books. Yeah.
So and the other book is mainly the 40 games and activities that you can do with refugee children and which under certain principles have a healing effect in trauma. Also under the project, we created an educational program consisting of workshops, supervisions, worksheets, methodology guide about how to use these two books and about how to help refugees fleeing wars and also how to become a certified trainer in this program, which means that besides using these books, which will be for free access on our websites, you can also go to schools or refugee organizations and deliver the whole program.
I hope
the two books are now already in 4 languages. English, Ukrainian, Arabic, and Italian, and about 5 more languages are in progress now. And I think by the end of the year, we might have all the English versions. At the end of the year, it's also the end of the project. Until then, there will be a link for viewing. And if you would like to download the books, we will ask you to contact us and we will send a downloadable version. And about everything else, you can then read about on our websites.
And that is the book, the picture book.
Mhm. Yeah, Lillian is showing the picture book. Lillian is our main lecturer in the educational activities.
Yes.
Lillian, do you have a copy of the handbook printed?
Yes. No, the other book.
The other, no,
No, okay.
no. The final design of the other book was made about 5 days ago. So
It will come.
yeah, it will come. So thank you again for being here. Thank you, Maggie, for volunteering to go through this book and presenting it to others. And I will now give word to Maggie and just thanks and enjoy.
Thank you, Katerina. So I was thinking that I didn't have much experience working with children fleeing from war. And then I said, wait a second, I had forgotten, because in California, where I live in my city, Long Beach, we had refugees coming from the Pol Pot regime, and then their children and their children's children that I worked with in the school system for many years, and children from the Vietnam War, and then children fleeing from violence from Central America and Mexico. So the truth is, I've had actually quite a bit of experience working with children fleeing from violence and war, from a whole societal or town being shaken up, more than just individual domestic violence in homes. But I have to say, I don't know how Katerina and her team did it, but they got these big books condensed into a little tiny pamphlet, because I use too many words sometimes. So kudos, thank you so much for abbreviating. So before I get into the book itself, I want to say that I thank Peter Levine as well for being my mentor and teaching me what it is to work with shock, and how it's very different than working with the emotions that come from losses. And they both, in cases of horrible things like war and occupation, we have both loss and we have shock. So I'm going to present to you today how to use the booklet in a way where you can help the children to feel safe, not just in their thinking brain or in their emotional brain, but in the brain structure, the lower brain, our instinctual brain, responsible for our ability to not just think we're safe, but actually know down to our bones that at least temporarily we're in a situation where the danger is over. It may not be over in the country we're coming from, but when children come to a safe place, when adults come to a safe place, very often they're bringing in their body the memory of the danger and are either collapsed or their body is hyper alert to danger when they're actually have arrived at a safe place. So I'm going to help you with those elements. I'd also like to say, because of Gabor Mate introducing me to, I call them heroes that start NGOs like Katerina in other parts of the world working with children. Ashira Prem, who's working with the occupied Palestinian children and teens and adults and has her own training program. Gabor Mate had introduced us, and she's going to be with us today at the end, or maybe in the middle, I don't know, with a grounding exercise that she's found very, very useful for working with occupied. She doesn't like to call them refugees because they're occupied territories. They're not fleeing from their countries. They're actually maybe displaced, just like some of the Ukrainian children and families are displaced within their own country. So they're occupied peoples. And the intention of Peter Levine and I had a conversation, because I just came back from Mexico teaching somatic experiencing, of making this global to work with all children who are fleeing and their parents and their caregivers fleeing from hostile, violent situations, so that eventually we'll have the pamphlets in every language. And due to Katerina and Haman's beautiful work together with the NGO that they created, Syrians for Czech people for Syria, Erasmus is saying yes to helping to get this off the ground. So thank you to everyone. So Ashira has been working with, I just wanted to say she's been working with not refugees, but occupied peoples, children, teens for about 4 years now. And before that, she was a human rights researcher and a journalist. So she has had her boots on the ground, so she knows what that's like. I don't know if Luma will be with us. Gabor Mate also introduced me to Luma, who's working with Lebanese children. So she's from Beirut. So I'm hoping, my intention is that globally, that all of you that come together with your hearts and your souls wanting to create peace in this world, can know this is for all children everywhere that are suffering from the horrible fragmentations of war and violence. And let's make an intention together before I go through the booklet. Just a moment of feeling your feet on the ground. If you can take your shoes off, it's even better to feel your connection with Mother Earth. To allow yourself to take a breath. To know that together we can start a movement for peace, working first with our own nervous systems, and then spreading out the goodness and the release of trauma from our own bodies that gets transmitted to all those whose lives we touch. Children, teens, babies, parents, caregivers, other mental health workers, that from our heart energy and our relaxed alertness and skillfulness that we are able to affect so many people by our model. So, are you ready? So I think you can open this. Is that correct? They can open this on their computer.
Yes.
If
There is,
not,
in the chat, there are 2 links and you can open the English version as well as other versions.
Yes. So, it starts off with explaining that the dangers of war, when children finally and adults finally come to the beautiful homes that they're being invited into in Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Germany, the United States. They're coming to the United States now, and they're welcomed into homes of strangers sometimes, not just relatives, but yet people don't understand that the trauma is not over until the person actually experiences what it's like to feel safe inside their body. So they could be orienting to the beauty of a new home, some new toys for children, maybe pets, maybe new friends, because there's siblings in the house or other children, but they may not feel well. And usually the caregivers don't understand why. The children may feel nervous, or they may say nothing's wrong. And very often what happens when they say nothing's wrong, I'm fine, is that actually they start to experience nightmares. So it goes into the deep psyche, the trauma that they've experienced that has affected their sense of safety at the instinctual level. And so it will show up and they'll end up screaming in the middle of the night, or it'll end up with somatic complaints. It's very typical that children will experience stomach aches and headaches. And I know when I was in Thailand after the Southeast Asian tsunami, that almost everyone had weakness in their legs. That's the part of us that wants to run and hide. And they had headaches and stomach aches, but they didn't realize it had to do with the tsunami wave. They actually dissociated or separated and compartmentalized. And when we showed up, they were looking for medication from us to help them with their headaches, to help them with their stomach aches, to help them with their lack of energy. And so we had to explain, first of all, that these are normal symptoms of trauma, and that the way trauma shows up in children is not always obvious. They may just lose their appetite and not want to eat, or they're always seeking something sweet to comfort them. These are all signs that the children, even though they're playing with the other children, that they are still harboring symptoms of trauma. And this is how the booklet will show how to help. So trauma occurs when something happens so suddenly and so intensely that it's simply too much for the nervous system to cope with. And it's very unusual for people to experience things coming from overhead, like helicopters and bombs and explosions, and not knowing where they're coming from. So with children, with adults, they can have a little bit more, that's not that they're not traumatized, but they're able to mobilize the children and bring them to safety, whether it's hiding in a cellar or in an auditorium, underground, moving to another place. But the children are, especially the young ones, are very often carried. So they can feel the anxiety of the adults in their bodies, but they're not using their bodies to take that energy of mobilization to move away, to use it up. So one of the things that's beautiful about the program that Katrina put together for the handbook and that Lillian is teaching are the activities that will come along with the handbook. And they're simple games like tag and hide and seek, but they're done in a way where children have a chance to prepare, to actually feel the mobilization in their body, getting ready. The way the games are set up is a little different. It's designed specifically for helping to release the traumatic activation from the flight and fight muscles in the body, whether it's having to duck from a ball being thrown, or whether it's playing my favorite game from Ale Duarte. If those of you who know Ale, The Wolf Comes at Midnight, where the children get their system activated, but in a pleasurable way, in a way that is sympathetic activation, but not for trauma, but for a fun game. But then they get to feel it. And then they're given time, because the wolf isn't here yet, to check in and do what I call the weather report inside, to feel actually what activation feels like in the body, and to allow themselves through self-touch or the touch of a caregiver to begin to feel the energy moving from a rapid heartbeat, from a shallow breath, pausing to have a deep breath come in, and feeling energy moving from the anxiety centers of the body, which are usually the chest and the belly, the stomach and the belly, and have the energy move into the legs and into the feet, so that they can begin to feel coming back into their body in a very regulated way. And the games that are taught alternate between active play and resting and noticing the changes, so that children can begin to calm themselves down and regulate. So let's go through some of the places in the book that I highlighted that I thought were really important to help you with. besides, there's a list of children. We can actually look at page 13. When they're stuck in what's called a dorsal vagal collapse in neuroscience, for those of you who have had SE or studied polyvagal from Stephen Porges, child stuck off. There's a whole list. I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it in your own language if you speak Ukrainian or Italian or English or Czech on page 13. So those are things it's important to let the caregivers know that this is what happens and there's signs of trauma still living in the body. And then on page 14, there's a lovely list of all the ways children can display being stuck on. And those are the kids that tend to be more hyperactive to start with, and very often older kids, because older kids have more mobility because they can run. In fact, some kids can run a lot faster than adults. But for the younger children, they're more likely to be suffering from the stuck off, especially, or older children that may have a handicapping condition, an autoimmune disease, or they're suffering from some other illness. For some reason, they're not as mobile as other children their age. They may be stuck off.
Maggie, I can share the screen that everybody can see it. What page you have?
Well, 13 are the stuck off, and then 14 are the stuck on. So we could do 13.
Everybody see it?
Yes, yes.
Okay. It needs time to scroll. 1 minute. I'm too quick. Maggie, when you talk, and I wait till the pages are ready.
Oh, I need to wait a second. I have to put my glasses on to see. Oh, this one explains what is trauma and how it overburdens our nervous system, and that to heal, we go back one. Let's go see what that says. To heal from trauma, this mobilized energy needs to be accessed and used in a slow, regulated way. And that's what I was sharing with the games that you'll be taught to use in another segment. If you take the training of how to use the games, that we don't just play the games, but we play them in a trauma-informed way so children can release the activation in a slow, regulated way. Otherwise, it just recirculates, and every time there's a trigger, like a loud noise, for example, or someone coming quickly, a train going by, it could traumatize the child again, because all of the energy that they didn't get to use up is still lying in wait. And a little trigger will start the whole trajectory of fight and flight and freeze hormones and chemicals in the body. Okay, so what are the traumas? Go ahead. What are the symptoms? So children that are stuck in the off state, they have a collapsed body. They're usually the ones that are harder to spot because they don't get into trouble. They don't run around poking other kids. They may seem sad and not interested in friends, and maybe they put a lot of time into their schoolwork, but maybe because they're not really bothering anybody, sometimes they're not noticed as much as the children that are hyperactive. But these children will sometimes hurt themselves, and they even do that when no one's no one's watching. So they have to be watched out, the quiet ones, the ones that have a poor appetite, and the ones that have nightmares. They tend to be tired and not be engaged in play, and you'll learn what to do with those children when they are encouraged to play games, how to help them get their energy back. And the adult caregivers learn how to help the child to start moving their legs again and to come back with adult support. And very often it will need touch support from the adult in a way that maybe even starts moving the legs, or helping the child to ground by putting hands on the child's feet or a heavy pillow to help them feel more connected. Okay, so let's go to the next page. Some children get stuck in the on state where they have too much mobilized energy ready to fight. The other state has a lot of energy too, but the muscles are collapsed. With these children, I don't know what that screechy noise is. Does anybody know what that noise is? Hello? I can't hear myself. There's a loud screech.
There's an echo.
It's somebody who has a mic open.
Please make sure that your mics are closed. Thank you. Yeah. So some children, the children actually that are stuck in the off state are the ones that are suffering the most, but they usually they get noticed the least, because the ones that are stuck with the sympathetic activation, always charged, they're the ones that will break things. They'll have restless leg. They'll have difficulty concentrating. They may get angry easily or irritated. They may even shout. They could have nightmares or night terrors as well. But because they're very anxious and maybe run around a lot because their muscles aren't collapsed, they also almost never feel safe, but they're noticed more. And it's important to understand that when you help children to come out of a state that's stuck off, that very often they'll start to feel their muscles returning, and the energy that's lying in wait underneath will be there, and they may have strong reactions to very slight triggers. They may start to feel restless. They may start to get more irritated and argue and get into verbal or physical fights. But it's actually a good sign that their energy is coming back into their limbs. And so we have to help them to channel that energy into constructive activities, into working together in groups to make things, to build things. They can work together with games to help each other. And one of the games that's taught is working with parachute games of cooperation, having everyone work together to get a ball or an object to stay on the parachute when it's being wildly thrown up and down in the air in a violent way. How do you get everyone to cooperate and not let the ball go off? And then to stop and allow time for the energy, that high activated energy, to start to relax. And one of the best ways I know is to have children sit on the floor, so their whole pelvic bowl is touching the floor and they feel the grounding of the floor. And you can have them put their hand on their heart, the hand on their stomach or their belly, or their hand on their throat if their throat's activated, and they can feel their own nervous system coming down into a calm, relaxed state. So you teach them how to feel activated and how to feel deactivated, how to feel regulated and how to feel dysregulated, but in a fun way. So let's go to the next page, Lillian, thank you. They're all normal, so continue on. Okay, support to the parent. Okay, this is very important because the children will pick up the nervous energy or the fear or the depression of their parents. So it's important for the caregivers, the mental health workers, the volunteers that weren't part of the trauma to support the people that were, the adults that were. And you have to be calm enough to stop and to do something that we call biological orienting, which is to look around. I'm going to have you all take a moment to look at your surroundings right now. Look behind you. Look to each side of you. See where your eyes go. Feel the ground. If it helps to stand up, you can do that and feel your feet apart. and bend your knees a little bit so that you can actually feel closer to the ground. And then take a peek inside your body and notice what's happening in the body. And very often what people report is that they feel the tension in their muscles, or they feel, they may feel, it says, Lydia, may I have English subtitles? This is in English. This is English. Yeah. To let the fear and stress settle so that they can react calmly. And then it says, take a deep breath. But what happens usually if the person is really, this is number 5, if the person or the child can find something in the, either in the room that they're in, or if they're outdoors or they have a window, if they can look out, it could be a tree outside the window or a flower. It could be that they look around and they find some stones, or maybe a new toy, or a stuffed animal, or maybe their mommy, or maybe a new stranger that took them in that they feel fond of. What happens is the breath will automatically deepen when they take the time to notice. So rather than taking a deep breath, it actually is helpful to allow a deep breath to come by itself first. If it doesn't, there's nothing wrong with asking to take a deep breath. And Stephen Porges, he recommends that if a person is very agitated, very dysregulated, to make the exhale more longer than the inhale. So we can even do that together right now. So imagine that if you inhale and you can silently count, and say your inhale goes to the count of 6. And then you should pause. And then when you exhale, I always double it. So if I inhale to 6, then I exhale to 12. And then wait. There's a pause and wait for the breath to come back in. So there's many different recommendations from different works from yoga and other religious traditions, different traditions that helps with different breathing exercises. But I really recommend allowing the reptilian brain to take over. And by spending time, I recommend 5 to 8 minutes, just noticing and feeling where the breath goes, having the children actually and the adults touch their ribs, feel their rib cage. Lying down on the ground helps. They can really feel the ribs and how they open and close. And just to notice the rhythm, the rhythm that comes naturally without us doing anything to interfere. A regulated, organic, natural, automatic breath has 4 parts. It has an inhale and a pause and an exhale and a pause. And people that are coming from violent situations or disasters and tragedies very often will do chest breathing, and they only breathe in their chest. And it's very difficult for the breath to go down to the lower body. So one of the things I do, if you can see me in the small picture, is I have with children take a small river rock or flat object and have them actually put it on the diaphragm when they're lying down. And in addition to feeling their ribs, they can watch their belly go up and down from the stone. If it's a small child, you can put a smaller stone so that they get the idea of naturally watching without effort to watch a regulated breath come in. Now, if they're struggling, Of course, you can help them by saying exhale slowly, have their eyes open, because sometimes closing the eyes will put them into a state from what happened last week or last month or last year, or from when they were even younger and had another trauma of some sort. So doing it with an adult with eyes open is very helpful. Okay, you can teach the kids your own methods for healing and for relaxing. Let's go to the next page. Let's move on here. So, okay, this is about creating groups, and especially during having rituals. Having some sort of an everyday activity can really be helpful to get some normality back and a regular schedule. It's helpful for adults, but it's particularly important for children, and to begin starting holidays again. Would you continue on with the picture? I mean, with the book to the next page. I want to move on to some of the pages I want to call your attention to. Resources. Okay, let's stop here. So what I encourage people to do is take a sheet of paper, and a big one, and fold it in half and put external resources on one half of the paper and internal resources, and help the children to actually, if they can't write, adult writes it for them, to make a list of things that make them feel safe. If they're older and teens, they could make the list themselves. And things that make them smile. Things that make them feel powerful and competent. Things that make them feel connected with others. Okay, Lillian, you can move it up a little bit. There's some examples there. Thank you. For example, it could be family members. It could be access to the natural environment, like, you know, the trees and the beautiful springtime flowers. And if they live near a stream or a brook, or there's animals outside, squirrels, birds. I know for me, when I wake up and the birds are singing, it's a happy day for me. I love to look outside. Right now I have some lovebirds. They're doves, peace doves actually, that came to my house, and they are mating in my backyard and building a nest together. And so these are things that make me know that life goes on no matter what, and make me feel hopeful. So you want them to also find things that help them feel connected. Maybe it's a game that they can play, whether it's a physical game like a ball toss game, or whether it's a board game where they can move objects around and they play and they laugh together and compete with one another to have them feel connected. So this is a list of examples, anything from a warm blanket to plush toys to I find for kids, when I'm working with them, that in addition to plush animals, that the things that help kids the most are rhythmic music and art, construction and art materials. I've worked also with, if those of you are sand play tray therapists, it's very easy to make a sand tray. You can use a cardboard box. You don't have to have a fancy box made out of wood, especially in improvised settings. But children have little objects and they can make scenes. And the important thing is, whether you're working with art or you're working with little figurines in a sand tray, or you're working with figurines outside of a sand tray, or you're working with puppets, that the children are what we call, they have the opportunity to pendulate. That's a word coined by Peter Levine, and it means moving from traumatic activation, traumatic scenes, traumatic images to the opposite. If they make a scene of war, then what's a scene that would be the opposite? So they have both. It's not to deny, what's happening and what's happened and what's happening currently, but it's also to give them a sense of what they would like the future to look like. So when the mind works with opposites and then they don't get stuck in one fantasy, a dissociation of something that's unreal, they see the reality of war, but they also can see that there is an opposite and there's a future to their life. Because one of the things that happens when people are stuck in the traumatic activation is they have no sense of a future. So rhythm, bringing back the rhythm through music is really essential. And for teens, there's teen music, and for kids, there's kids music, and from every different culture has their own rhythms and dances. And it's important to bring back those traditions and to have the children feel their body moving. And when they stop, to pause and notice what happens inside, and to have them look for how their sensations and emotions begin to change through the movement. So that empowers them to find their own resources. But for little children, a lot of the resources are going to come from the outside of them. For the little babies and infants, it's going to come from the pets around them and the people around them and their stuffed toys. For the older people, it can come from their play group, from their school. It could come from a spiritual tradition. It could come from a natural gift that they have, like maybe they're really good at drawing, or they're good at making things, or they're good at science, or they have a sense of humor, or they're really good at making friends and bringing friends together and planning adventures together. Those personal characteristics, their spirituality, those are all things that they need to remember, that those are resources. And if they write them down, I do another step. After they write them, I ask kids to imagine them. And then if it's possible for them to draw them, to draw their resources, or pick one, favorite one, and to draw it and then to look at it. In somatic experiencing, a method of healing shock trauma, especially from situations like war and disaster, we do something called the SIBAM, and the S are for the sensations inside the body, and the I is for the images. Now, children have had a lot of very traumatic images, and so we want to embed images that are resourceful. And one of the quickest ways to embed it is not just to have them make a list, but to actually draw it, imagine it, look at it, and then when they look at a favorite resource, to ask them a question like, when you look at that, how do you know you feel more comfortable? Or how do you know you feel safe? Where in your body does safety live? And you'd be surprised. Children are better at this than adults. Where is the safety in your body? I was working with one little boy who was his family came from Mexico, from violent narcotics traffic and people being killed, and moved to the United States. His mother, he lost his mother, and he was living with his father who worked, and a bully brother who took his irritation and trauma out on his little brother. The brother never felt safe at school and never felt safe at home. And I had him draw a peak. He got really triggered during math class because he wasn't so good at math. And I had him imagine a time that made him feel unsafe. And it was when his brother yelled at him for being stupid in math and ripped up his paper and bullied him when his father wasn't around and made him cry. And so I said, well, can you think of a time when you actually, something good happened in math? Now, this boy was 10 years old. He said, nothing. I said, okay, just sit for a bit and just close your eyes and go all the way back to kindergarten. Did you ever have a nice teacher, ever? And he went all the way back and he said, I know. When I was in first grade, my teacher couldn't help my friend understand how to subtract and carry numbers. And she asked me if I would help. And I helped my friend, and he understood, and I got to teach him the math. And his whole entire body went from collapse like this. Can you see me? Can they see me? Can you spotlight me just for a minute? His maybe not.
You
I
are
think,
spotlighted.
but Lillian, you need to, yes, stop the
Okay.
screen. Yes.
So his whole body went from completely collapsed with his head down. I can't do math. That's why I run away every time I have math. He would actually run out of the classroom. And he starts telling me about the time he helped his friend. And he sits up like this, and his shoulders are wide. And a big deep breath came in, and his chest expanded like it was 3 times larger than his body. And I said, what do you notice now? He said, I don't know what you mean. I said, well, you can close your eyes or keep them open, but I want you to go inside your body because I'm noticing. Sometimes you have to help children to notice. I'm noticing that your chest has gotten really big and that you have a lot of breath inside of you. This is the magic trick. If you take a little time to notice the magic inside of you and you feel your breath, what happens? And he said, he actually closed his eyes. Some kids don't feel safe closing, but he felt safe enough and he closed his eyes. He put his hand on his heart and he said, I feel a little island of safety. It's a small island of safety around my heart. And I said, how do you know? How do you know that you know that? That's beautiful. What does it feel like? What's the sensation? And he went back in and he took a little time and he said, because it's getting warm in there. You see, this is a child coming out of shock back into their physiology, back into their physical body. And this is how the healing takes place. So I said, wow. So when that happens, can you take a little more time and see if that little island of warmth and safety, maybe it'll spread if you take more time with it, because your body's magical, right? And now you just found the magic wand to help yourself when you're in math class. And so he took a little time and it spread a little further. Yeah. And I forgot to tell you that I had him draw a picture of what happens in math class. And he drew a picture of butterflies, like about a whole bunch of little butterflies in his little stomach area. And I explained that the butterflies are there for movement, to help your legs and arms move. And I asked him what he wanted to do. And he said that he would like to get his brother to stop bullying him. So I had him feel his ability to now that he's older, to tell his brother to stop and to let his dad know what his brother's doing and to not let his brother bully him. And he was old enough also to stay in the after school program so that he didn't have to have his brother taking care of him after school. So we made a lot of changes in his life. And we also found an uncle that he could contact if his father wasn't available to help him. So every children need an adult that they can go to. And we told the teacher about his new discovery, and he was able to keep a new picture on his desk, a picture of his stomach with only one butterfly. One butterfly, because his butterflies had calmed down, and he only felt one butterfly just in case he needed to move fast, but he could relax, and his teacher could remind him to pause if he needed to take a moment to relax his body again. He knew how to do it. So these are important concepts. These are not intellectual. This is not about the neocortex thinking away the trauma. what do you mean you're safe now? Why do you feel that way? No, it's not about that. It's about the body feeling safe. So let's see what time it is. Oh, we need to move along. Okay, so let's go to the next page. Lillian, can you put that back up again? Yeah, so that also, the making resources and embodying them are very important. And we have a page about safety, but I think I already taught you about that. So let's look at the power of words. The words are really important. The words, their tone of voice means so much, because with children, with all of us, if we speak too quickly, or we're agitated or nervous because we're new at helping and we're not sure if we're doing it right, we have to let all that go. And our voice needs to be reassuring, because the social engagement part of our nervous system, what Stephen Porges calls the ventral system, is our facial muscles, the cranial nerves in our face, for smiling, for listening, that goes into our inner ear, and for speaking, and also the parasympathetic that goes into our heart and lungs. Those all work together. So a soothing voice that has some rhythm to it, that's slow and safe, will help the child to feel more connected, and to use words that actually reassure them that although the war may still be going on, or the occupation or whatever, that they are now in a safe place. And what will help most is if they can feel that safety in their body, so that the trauma ends in their body, and that will help others to feel more relaxed and safer as well. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, this page is important. 2023, helping move time ahead from the past to the present by guiding them to notice sensations as they begin to release. What do you feel now? What has changed? What do you notice that's different, that might feel better? And if they have uncomfortable feelings, yes, these are normal because of what happened, but they will go away and you will be okay. Just allow yourself, I'm right here with you, and I will make a container. I will be here with you, eyes open and closed. I will be here to help you with those feelings so that you're not alone with them. And when the children know that the adults are there with them to help them with their feelings, the feelings in the child begin to release. And remind the children of the resource. You said playing ball was a resource, or playing with the puppy, or playing puppets. Would you like to do that with me right now? And puppet play is great for kids, because the adult can play the part of the one that's in disbelief. Oh, really? That really happened? I don't believe you. And then the child will say, no, that really happened. And well, how does that? Oh my God, if that happened to me, this is how I would feel. The puppet could say, it could be a shark or a bear or a rabbit, or how do you feel? What's going on inside of you right now? My little bunny has a nervous tummy. How are you feeling? Your tummy's nervous too? Okay, let's see if we could help the bunny to feel better. Do you have an idea? And sometimes children will come up with their own ideas to calm. So reminding them of their resources, playing and normalizing both the uncomfortable and the comfortable feelings is really important. Okay, let's move on to the next page. Yes, safety. What I wanted to say is that the safety is so important for them to embody it. And I think I already gave that idea working with telling you about Carlos, whose family ran away from the narco traffickers in Mexico from violence. And he also only had one parent, and how I helped him by drawing. But you can also help the child to feel like they can hold a rock. That's very often a helpful thing, or a squishy ball like this, right? Or to give them art materials to cut and paste or to draw. Very often that will help them to find the safety place inside. Also, you can invite them to make a little hut, a little fort. Kids love to make forts out of old sheets or old towels or old blankets, using a table or a chair and to hide underneath. And then when they go underneath, you could say, wow, what else would you like to feel safe? Sometimes they want more pillows on top of them. They want to really burrow down underneath and feel the warmth of the cuddly blanket. And then they feel that on their skin. Sometimes they want an adult in their little hut with them, especially if they're little. And you can go in there with them and then invite them to say what it's like in there and how they know that their feelings and sensations are changing. So let's go on to the next page. Oh, and then you can have them draw it later. They could draw their hut and look at it whenever they need to look at it, because they might not be able to take their safe place to school with them. Okay, safe touch. How a caring adult can help children feel more secure. They really, feelings are contagious. So if the caregivers are feeling calm and regulated, and they have a nice sense of excitement, but it's relaxed, it's a calm excitement with a game, and they're feeling their breath through their body and feeling grounded. And then they touch a child on the arm, for example, these muscles in the arm, the deltoid muscles, sometimes just squeezing, having the child squeeze their arms and putting your hand on top of theirs, or if they're little, holding them with the hands and giving them a little pressure on the deltoid muscles will help to repair their ruptured boundaries from the violation. Of course, if they don't like it, you don't touch them. Only if children like it. But you can also play little games like squeeze the nose or hand clapping games, putting the hand on their back to let them know that they have someone that's watching their back, playing with their hair, right? Placing your hands or a soft pillow on their feet and pressing toward the ground when they're sitting. You can sit on the ground next to them and literally with your hand press their feet down and ask them if they could feel the earth beneath them supporting them. And it's the energy from our gravity, our body and gravity moving down into the earth and connecting, as well as energy moving up from Earth's center and coming up to support the child. It's like, call it the kissing your feet. Let Mother Earth kiss the bottoms of your feet. You go down to meet Mother Earth and feel her support. Also the support from universal energy, whatever their spiritual or religious tradition, to if they don't have a religious tradition or a spiritual tradition, it could be just universal energy, to feel it coming from above down into the crown of their head and entering their body. So they're getting support from heaven and earth. Sometimes children just need more hugs, and it's really important to give them that if they're wanting that. And if they start to shake or tremble and to release some trauma, you don't want to hold them too tightly. You don't want to stop the release. If they start to shake and tremble, you go, that's right. That's all the scary feelings coming out of you. Just let that happen. Look at me, look around, and notice that you're safe now and the scary feelings can go away. They don't need to stay inside of you anymore. And very often they will tremble. So you don't want to hold a child and stop that from happening, because that releases the traumatic memory that's in their body. Okay, let's go on to the next page. And it shows different ways you can touch, right? Just hand holding sometimes is enough. Okay, anger and aggression. Okay, there will be anger. Actually, that's a good sign that a child is moving out of a collapsed, shut down stage, and they're starting to feel the energy that's in their nervous system moving into their limbs. So they may get pushy, or they may get verbal and angry and, start saying things that show that they're irritated, or they might complain a lot. So you have the power as adults to de-escalate a frightened child. When a child is hostile, it means they're frightened. Just assume it. An angry child is a very frightened child. Just remember that. So in order to help a frightened child, the adult has to settle down themselves. You take an upright posture, not of authoritarianism, but of authority. Feel your own body settle, like you have to tell yourself, I can do this. You might even take a step backwards rather than doing this. Don't you dare. Instead, you have your hand in a gesture to show I'm here to help. And you speak in a kind voice. It's okay that you're mad. I understand that you're really angry right now. It's not okay to hurt anyone or yourself. And it's not okay to hurt property. I can stay here with you until your anger starts to feel better. You can color your anger. You can throw a ball in the air. You can show me by running in place, or showing by pushing something against the wall, like a pillow. You can rip up scrap paper. There's ways to express that anger, to move it out of you. And look at their eyes, their face, their voice, their belly, their arms, their fists, their legs, and their feet. Ask them where they notice the anger. Where does the anger live in you? And if it's your eyes, sometimes using a sense of humor can help. Oh, your eyes. Oh, your mouth. Yes, I can see fire coming out of your mouth. Can you draw a picture of yourself right now to show me all the places where the angry feelings are? Sometimes they start in the belly. Sometimes they start in the fists. Sometimes eyes could kill, the glare from eyes, and you can have them draw a picture, and very often that will start to dissipate the angry feelings. And then they can talk about it with you when they're calmed down. They can talk about what they're so angry about, and you can help them know that coming from a violent situation, it's the anger that they receive from the violence, and that they don't need to keep it in their body anymore. They can get rid of it by drawing it and expressing it with clay, with colors, with painting, with anything that you can help them with. Okay, next one. These illustrations are lovely. Oh, shaking. We already talked about the shaking. That is the like the butterflies in the stomach and starting to shake a little bit. That can be extinguished by discharging that energy, a lot of it through games that you'll be taught if you end up taking the program to be certified in how to work with kids. If it's too intense, it's important that you use your calm voice to slow down the shaking so they don't get re-traumatized. You don't want them to feel the shaking that's so strong that they feel like the incident is happening again. So you can, again, touch their arm or help them to ground by putting, if you're sitting next to them or across from them, to put your feet on their feet to help them feel the ground and say, look at me, you're safe now, just let the shaking happen. Are you okay? Are you scared right now? And if they say no, let them shake away. Say, that's great. Just let all that shaking come out. That's all the scaring feelings. You're doing wonderfully. You're letting it all come out. Wow. If they say, no, I'm feeling scared again, then you want to have them stand up maybe and show what their body wants to do. Usually with scary feelings, the energy is made for running. So you can have them run in place and move the energy from the shaky feeling into their legs, or they want to move their arms to push something away, and have them do those motions to help discharge it. And tell the child again that it's okay. Reassure them, but not too tight. You can hold them. If it's a tiny child, you can hold the child on your lap, but again, use the hand to support their boundary muscles of the arm or their back muscles to show that you're backing them, but don't hold them so tight that the shaking stops. You want the shaking to happen. That's an important way of discharging shock trauma. Okay, next page. We're doing great, Lillian. I want to have time for questions. Oh, okay, and nightmares. So very often children will have nightmares or night terrors. And what I do, we can move a little bit further. We don't have to read this whole page. You can read it later, but we can have them, if they show people chasing them, which very often it's a monster or something, you can have them play the role of the monster or the people that are chasing them, soldiers or whatever, and have them be in the powerful position and have them show you how they would chase, they would become the person that's chasing them, and they would defeat the enemies, the ones that are hurting them. They would defeat them in their dream. So you always have them draw the opposite, draw their nightmare, and then draw the opposite on another sheet of paper. It's remarkable how this works. With a very short session today, I can't take you through the entire step-by-step of how to do this, but it's pretty remarkable how working with opposite drawings makes all the difference in the world. Okay, so go ahead. You want them to get the opposite or the pendulation. Okay, grief. This is a little more difficult because the grief takes more time to release. Believe it or not, the shock trauma that's stuck in the physiology that keeps children from being able to sleep deeply and have good digestion, and also be able to have deep breathing and let their depression and anxiety leave it behind them. Those are all physiological functions from the deep core of the reptilian brain. The shock trauma that Peter Levine teaches us is that's easy to work with, because once the energy is discharged, whether it's through physical play or whether it's through pendulation, through drawing and having a more relaxed settling in the body, once that goes away, children will begin the grieving process. Otherwise, they're living in denial, which is the first stage of grief. So when we lose someone, and the children that had to leave the fathers that are soldiers and either injured or dying or fighting, that's very hard because it's still going on. There's a lot of sadness, but once you get the child out of the numbness, they can start feeling. It's important that they feel the sadness and that they have time to grieve, to shed their tears with carrying others, to unload their burdens. You should never, ever grieve alone. You need to have a group to grieve with. And it's helpful to have the children in a group where the families come together with their adults, with the children in a group to talk about the loved one that they left behind, to invite them to memorialize that person, to draw their feelings, to cry, to say goodbye, to write a letter of goodbye, to make drawings if they don't have photos with them, to do arts and crafts and make memory objects. That's all important to move the feelings away. And again, angry feelings will come up, and it's important to work with the angry feelings as well as the sad feelings. The important thing is that to work with the shock so that they're not numb and depressed, because depression will not help them to grieve. It will make the grieving postponed. And I've worked with people that lost loved ones, and 20 years later, they thought they grieved, but it was more from a mental place, and they never actually released the grief because they were still in shock. So when you work with the shock trauma and the physiology And then you can go back and forth with the grief. You intertwine both of them because the grief takes longer. The shock can actually be worked through pretty quickly. Okay, next page, Lillian, we're doing right here. We're almost done with the booklet. Okay, these activities you'll be taught, it's in a different handbook, so we're not going to go through these, but they're activities that help kids to check inside and debrief. So they play the activity, they stop. They check inside, they stop again. If they're numb or tired, the adults are trained how to help them get the energy back up. If they're hyperactive, the energy by the adults that are in charge of the game by changing the rhythm will show how to channel the survival energies into games and how to release it. And sometimes during the pause, everyone shakes. Sometimes during the pause, the children end up with a little headache or stomach ache, and the adults are trained to work with the survival energy that is causing the symptom to make it go away. That's not the purpose of today. We're just going through the booklet to show you the program and how to use this particular picture book. Okay, next page. I think we're almost done. Arts, I use arts all the time. One of the things I like to use is the gingerbread drawing. This is a felt cutout. I'll show you when we get to the end. There we go. I think that's the end of the booklet. It just tells about the different organizations that are working together. But this is a felt cutout of a gingerbread cookie. And I have children make this. If they're little, I trace their whole body on a piece of paper. If they're bigger, I have them make their own. And then they can draw the colors of their sensations and emotions in the different parts of their body so that they can begin to release them. I found it to be extremely effective in all kinds of situations. But the important thing is, if all the feelings are uncomfortable, you have to help them find places in their body where they feel a resource, where they feel safe or comfortable. It could be their tip of the nose, right? Or it could be they just feel good in their toes, right? You have to help them to find and then color what that's like. Well, how do you know you feel good in my toes? Well, my toes feel like they want to dance right now. Okay, great. You can get up and dance. What does that feel like? Is there a color with that or a shape? And they might color their feet like with little swirls or little up and down movements, right? So yes, I feel good in my feet. Okay, well, draw what that's like. So they get a balance of comfortable and uncomfortable feelings so they can move with both. And that's how you resolve trauma. You need the traumatic activation together with the counter or opposite activation. We call it the counter vortex in somatic experiencing to help heal the trauma. So I wanted to, we only have an hour and a half, right? Is that correct? I think that's pretty much the end of the booklet. It just shows children singing and dancing. My friend Ashira does Sufi dancing with children. She did it with me to help me to feel more grounded after I was struggling with coming out of an illness. You can go to the end. You can show the back of the booklet to show the organizations involved. I think it's got all the different organizations. And Somatic Experiencing is now also partnering. It's EASE from the European Association and SEI International, Somatic Experiencing International from Boulder, Colorado. So we're all moving in this together to help. And we have a lot of people that want to volunteer from all over the world. So we can take the booklet off now.
So there are questions, Maggie, in the chat.
Yes.
So there is from Ellen Batias, notice the pressure children experience for having to be responsible for siblings due to lack of parental ability.
What? I'm
so
sorry.
This about, so maybe if you want to read it.
Is it in English?
Yes, it is. And then there is question about nightmares.
What advice would you give to parents of teenagers who have left for safety but now won't return to the Ukraine? They are magnetized by online communication with friends who have stayed. It is a frequent problem. Yeah, well, that's yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, that's a question that teenagers and parents always have problems with, opinions about what the family needs to do. So it's not exactly within the scope of working with shock trauma, but I think it's important that you allow the teenagers to share all the reasons why they think that's important to them, and to help them with any feelings that come up if it's impossible for them to have what they want. I mean, it's just, we don't always get what we want in life, but it's important that they know that the parent respects their feelings, respects and helps them to deal with them. Whether it's anger, they can again show where in the body they hold the anger, why it's important to them. And if they're sad about it, to say, I understand that you're really sad. Maybe there's a way that we can connect you up with the friends if we move back. Maybe we can still continue online communication if we make sure we get to a place where there's online communication. So you have to resolve that. It's not exactly the scope of the working with the actual traumatic activation itself. There's a wonderful book by Daniel Siegel called Brainstorm, and it's all about how parents and teenagers, how parents can help understand the teenage brain, which is not always easy, and how they can actually read portions of it with their teenager to help them understand each other. The parents understand the parents, the teenagers understand their parents, and the parents understand their teenagers. So that's all I want to say about that. I also, because I work all over the world, I have very lovely people that specialize in working with children from trauma. And I have 2 women that started the Griffelen program in the Netherlands. Unfortunately, my colleague Dinko, she died a few days ago. But she helped Eveline. They won awards. They took my book, Trauma Through a Child's Eyes, and they made a whole program for children that were having challenges, emotional challenges, and their family. And she sent me, I told her about this today, and she sent me a link to the infant mental health program in the Netherlands, has materials in Ukrainian, a lot of them. And I wanted to give you the link and write it in the chat. So it's a lot, especially if those of you working with pregnant mothers from the war, and pregnant women that just gave birth, and women that may be nursing. There's information for that too. And there's information about the importance of play, why play is important, and different play therapy techniques. So I'm going to, it's in English, Dutch, and it's in Ukrainian. So let me just bring up the link. Okay, it's www.imhnederland. I had downloaded so much information. Of course, I did it in English because I don't speak Ukrainian, but the essentials of play and why it's important, and intentions of helping women that are pregnant. And also it says, sometimes women are afraid to nurse because they're anxious and they haven't recovered from their trauma, but actually nursing will help oxytocin, which is the hormone of hugging, and will help relax the mother and the baby. So don't be afraid to help the mothers to nurse, that it will help to relax them because they'll get hormonal health from their biology. Their biology is on your side. So the nursing mothers, it relaxes the mothers. So that's really important. Okay, I'm going to close the chat. Were there any other questions? Any other questions? Any
Is there
comments,
some
questions?
questions about nightmares, but I can't see it now. There is a lot of in the chat, so maybe if you can put your hand up and tell your question now,
Yes.
because there is a lot of in the chat and I can't see it.
That question was for me because I wanted to know the
Who's
technique
me?
from
Who's me?
nightmare.
Hello, who's me?
Hello, I'm Melissa.
Melissa.
I'm
Hi,
from
Melissa.
Germany.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to know about the nightmares, especially when you got a nightmare and by yourself and you try to calm down. I mean, like you're like very scary and scared at all, probably.
Yeah.
Can you do this, like calm down and go in the situation like if you were the bad person or the monster, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what I usually have kids do is they draw the nightmare first. They get it out on paper. The sensory motor activity of the drawing of it reaches into the deep psyche. And lots of times things will come out in the drawing that weren't even in your nightmare, but they were stimulated by the nightmare. So you're really reaching the deep unconscious. And those are the places that need to heal. It's the psyche that needs to heal from the lower brain, right? From the deep instinctual primal fear that we have. So you just let yourself draw and see what comes out. And then you take another piece of paper, separate piece of paper, and you draw the exact opposite of it. And sometimes it's a resolution. Like I was working with a boy who witnessed a hate crime, and I won't tell you what he witnessed, but the violence was off, and he had nightmares. And it was this giant fish that was chasing him, that was a monster fish chasing him to beat him up, even though he wasn't the one hurt. Because very often children, when they witness violence, they will take it as deeply as the person who was actually hurt. Sometimes worse, because the person that was hurt sometimes is struggling and gets away. And so some of the energy was mobilized to get away. The person that witnesses it, especially if they're younger, have less mobility in their body. And so they are very deeply traumatized by it. So then I had him draw the opposite. And so he became the big fish, and he drew a picture of him chasing other people away, and he felt better. And then I had him imagine what it's like to chase and get up and actually show me with his body. If it's a child, especially, show me what the chasing looked like. And did you have to push the monster away? Or what did you do? You know, can you do it now? Can we continue the dream in the daydream? So you go from the nighttime dream now to the daydream and have them use their whole body. I had one child become a warrior. He had warriors chasing him, and he became one of the warriors, and he started doing the chasing, and he showed me his warrior spear and what he would do to protect himself. And so children will come up with all kinds of stuff, adults too. So you take the nighttime dream and you have the daytime continue the dream to a conclusion where there's resilience and there's a successful outcome. Because that's what our survival brain memorizes, a script of how to protect ourselves. And if we couldn't protect ourselves, it remembers the script to shut down. So in the dream time, we have the opportunity to redo the script and to have the hippocampus, or the survival center of the brain that memorizes, have a new script by moving the body. And then the body doesn't care that it could never have happened in real life. The body now feels the empowerment. It feels the empowerment, yeah? And it remembers, oh, there's a different outcome to that nightmare or that nightmarish situation. You know, there's a different outcome, and my body got to feel it and I got to draw it. And oh my gosh, now when I check in with my body, I feel safe all of a sudden. Because the reptilian brain doesn't record past, present, future. It doesn't know, it doesn't matter that you couldn't have really protected yourself in that moment. Now, in present time, is the only place that trauma heals. In this moment, right now, between you and me, right now, is where the healing takes place. Isn't that cool?
Sounds cool.
Yeah, it works. I mean, I've seen this work so many times. People stuck in trauma, kids stuck for 8, 10, 12 years, adults stuck for 20 years. And I do 1 or 2 of these activities and boom, they don't have nightmares anymore. Now that's different than grieving the loss of someone. That takes longer because that's a pain of a loss of somebody important to us. And that can be worked with more easily once you get rid of the traumatic shock. Then the person can grieve and they can cry and express all their feelings of love and what they wish they could have said, and they can have ceremony and rest the person in peace. But that doesn't happen when people are in shock and they're still living, feeling unsafe inside. So
Yes, we had also a question for the stages of grief, so you already are answering.
yeah. Oh yeah, the stages of grief. Well, the first one is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote the iconic book on grief that's still popular today, talks about the first stage being denial. And what Peter and I talk about is really it's shock. There's a numbness that comes from the overwhelm when the loss was unexpected. If you have a 16-year-old cat that you're bonded with, of course you're going to miss that cat or that dog or that grandparent, but it's expected. You've been watching an ill grandparent die maybe for 5 years, and so you're expecting it. Shock is different. It doesn't just put you into temporary denial. It actually shuts the whole system down because it's too overwhelming. So that's in situations of war and occupation and people having to flee, it's a shock. It happened so fast. It was shocking to me living here in California where nothing bad is happening at the moment to see. I don't think people didn't really expect that Putin would leave the Donbass area and continue and just start pummeling cities. I mean, that was a shock, I think, to the whole world. So we have to work with the shock first, and that will loosen up the next stages of grief, which are sadness and anger, and they go back and forth. And when you're working with people who are depressed from the loss, it means they're not allowing themselves to feel the anger. Depression is the opposite. It's a pressing down, a suppression of the feelings of anger that the person won't allow to come. And the anger isn't always pretty because it's not always at the aggressor. Sometimes it's at themselves. Especially if it's a child loses a parent and they had misbehaved just before the parent dies, right? And they think, if only I had behaved better. My father would be fighting the war knowing that I love him, and I didn't get a chance to tell him before I left. So we have all those feelings too. So in both my first books, Trauma Through a Child's Eyes and Trauma Proofing Your Kids, there's a whole chapter on the difference between shock and grief. And these books they're in Czech. They're not in Ukrainian yet. They're in Turkish. In fact, the Turks are the first one who took my brand new book, Brain Changing, and made it into Turkish. So this is in 2 languages now. This is for school children. I mean, it's not just for schools, it's for whole communities, but it's in Hungarian, it's in Slovakian, it's in, of course, English, it's in Dutch, it's in German, it's in Italian, French. I don't know. I think it's in 22 languages. I think it's in Arabic. I think it's in 22 languages now. So the first 2 books, it's in Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, it's in Japanese, it's in Korean. Every day seems like every week I get a new book from another country that it's been translated into. So there's an entire chapter in there in working with shock and grief. Half of the chapter's about shock, especially from divorce and loss through death. And the second half is how to work the 5 stages of grief, and all the way down to the goodbye letter. if the person's not coming back, and it's very powerful. It's a timeline that goes through the feelings of anger and sadness and loss, and then the bargaining. I woulda, could have, I wish I had said something. I wish I didn't say something. I wish I did something. I wish I didn't do something. I wish they had done something. I wish they didn't do something. There's all these things that come up. I mean, sometimes they're tiny things, but they bother. I know my mother, when she was living with me in her elder years, she wanted me to help her sort her closet out and throw away clothes that she didn't want. And that's like the worst thing she could ask me to do, because I'm very bad at cleaning closets. If you saw my closet, you'd be horrified. And I said, Mom, I don't know how to do that. I'm not really good at it. And after this is like 10 years later, she died, and she was already had a stroke and was being cared for in a care home. And when she died, because I really worked out my relationship very nicely with my mom before she died, I didn't have a shock, but I did that little thing. Why couldn't I have helped my mother to clean her closet? Why couldn't I have just said yes and made her happy? That was bothering me for weeks. So I lit a candle, and I talked to my mom in the afterlife and apologized for not cleaning the closet, and that I really should have been listening. I was under a lot of stress at the time, working 2 jobs. And I said, I should have stopped and taken the time to do that. I really regret that. I hope you forgive me. And you ask for forgiveness from the other side, because love always lives in spirit. And you don't have to believe it, because they'll just come and visit you. If you light the candle and make the intention, you will feel it. You'll feel something change in you. So that's the important part, is to release. So I really encourage that chapter for those working with grief. Oh, so bargaining, I woulda, coulda, shoulda, and then the last one is acceptance. But when I teach grief and shock in my play shops, I have 7 stages, because I added working with shock at different points along the process, and getting rid of the shock to uncover another layer of sadness or anger, and then acceptance, and then another layer of shock until it's completely gone. So because I'm a shock trauma specialist, having been trained by Peter Levine, and an SE faculty member, international faculty member, I work with the shock and make sure that's all gone. And people have said, my God, I thought this was gone 20 years ago, until I did the timeline and wrote the goodbye letter. I had no idea how my whole life has been on a trajectory following the fact that I never really released the grief. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you very much.
Let's start a movement, a peace movement.
Yes, Maggie, because I'm looking also of the time, because we are all over it, I think.
Yeah, but people are still here. That's amazing. Yes. Okay, so I think that's it, huh?
Yeah.
It's going to be, Zlata, did you want to say about which languages it's going to be translated into?
Yes, we will be in contact with Kateřina, and all information will be posted on Facebook of EASE, SEI and Ukraine Task Force. So if you have any questions, we can put it to the Kateřina, or you can write directly to Kateřina. The email is in the chat, because still there are coming new translations, so stay in touch with us. And yeah, I think that Kateřina wrote it in the chat, but it's somewhere on the top. So for now, maybe Kateřina, can you repeat the you need? Yes.
At the moment, we have English, Arabic, Ukrainian, and Italian. And German text is complete, but we have to put together with pictures. And here you saw the very Arabic pictures. At the moment, like, we are making a little more general version for the whole world. So we chose some of the women in the hijabs and replaced them with a Ukrainian mother or a mother from somewhere else in the world. Of course, you can use the Arabic version if you like, because we started for Syrians. We felt that nobody is helping them. So we started with Syrians, and that's why we have that original Syrian version. So
right, and then we added the Palestinians through Ashira, and then we thank you Ashira, by the way, and then we added Luma from Lebanon because of the terrible explosion and people displaced and traumatized from that. So we're expanding to different cultures and different languages. I would like to see this expanded to every place in the world, in African languages, in Spanish for those fleeing from the narco wars in Central America and South America and Mexico. So we have a lot of work to do. I just implore you to join the movement. This book that I wrote, the subtitle is A Heart-Centered Movement to Wire Well-Being. And I really want to start a movement here. So you are the ones that are bringing this into the world. So thank you so much for your hearts and for your love.
And thank you so much, Maggie, for your time and generosity, and that you really came to us. You spent time with us more than almost 2 hours. And I believe that your work is really doing a lot of work. And thank you, Katerina. Thank you, Lillian, that you are really spreading the knowledge also through all the countries. And I hope that together we can really go for the peace and for the happy children, and it will be.
Yeah, what a team. Lillian, I met Lillian and Zlata and Tereza so many years ago, and my gosh, our paths still crisscross over and over, and I couldn't be happier to be with such wonderful women. So I hope men join us too. We need more men joining us. So I see some men in the audience. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Tereza and Zlata, thank you for the organizing, for make the whole Zoom account.
Yes, and thank you, UTF, SCI and EASE, that Ukraine Task Force can also support this project.
And will SEI make sure SEI gets a copy of this? Yes?
Yes.
Of course, this recording will be on SCI YouTube channel. It's
Okay.
so, and also SCI is giving support for translation and for changing the pictures. So SCI is really involved, and UTF also, like Ukraine Task Force. So all the world is connected really to help all the children and really to heal them.
So many people in the chat. Thank you all for your love. So many people I know. I just from play shops. I thank you all. I can't say all your names because there's too many and we're over time. But so I wonder if the team can stay on after everyone leaves. Maybe we go to a breakout room just to say goodbye to each other. And I want to express more of my appreciation.
Thank you very much for the
joining.
participation, and have a very good evening. And
Waking the Tiger from
well.
Peter Levine.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Maggie.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for being here. I love you all.